Welcome to BVTV Global, coming to you from the UK studios of BizVision. I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher. This is episode 2 of 2 of the BVTV Global Electric Vehicle Revolution duology with operations and supply chain expert, car enthusiast and author, Ken Boyer. Welcome back, Ken.
Thank you, Malcolm. Great to be here.
Yeah, I say car enthusiast. What does your wife say about your car enthusiasm?
Honestly, my wife laughs at me a little bit. I'm not one of these in the garage tinkering with my car. I view cars as useful transportation. I'm more of an enthusiast because I like to see the supply chain, how they're made and
Yeah.
what the connections are.
One of my neighbors is on his 7th car this year already. His wife goes mad about it. Ken, let's get into these questions that I want to do a deeper dive. Many of the leaders of small and medium-sized companies that I meet on a regular basis say they've got greater priorities to deal with in this challenging economy without having to devote time and some rather large money to the so-called niceties of becoming all EV. Are they right in such thinking or not?
There is such a thing as absolute right and wrong in some things. In business, it's fuzzy. So let's go back to my gears of change. Nobody wants to make a commitment in business and say, I'll help reduce carbon emissions by spending a whole bunch of money out of my pocket. You've got to make a financial case to make it profitable, or at least close to profitable, where I can get some goodwill. So I'll give you a couple examples. You mentioned earlier your colleague, friend, who's the head of procurement for the National Health Service in Britain. Okay, very tough spot. Thousands, if not millions of providers and customers. So managing the scope emissions is tough. Yeah. One of the opportunities is energy. Across the world, what we're facing, and I have an entire chapter on power sources, not that it's the be-all, end-all. I've learned a lot in writing it. But here's the thing. Wind and solar and other renewables are actually cheaper than fossil fuels if it's a new installation. And they reduce carbon emissions. They lead to a lot of improvements. Now, here's the challenge. Across the supply network, the National Health Service in Britain may not be able to install them on all the hospitals or facilities. But maybe they can encourage or build a partnership with people who are providing services to NHS. Okay, so that's what I mean by transforming supply networks. Find a financial win-win across two suppliers and find a way to either by contract or by a handshake, share the benefits.
Yeah, okay. You did mention scope 3 there, which is obviously a very big concern to many of the large companies that follow us. I was talking to a major construction company the other day, and they're wanting to really start applying scope 3 now, well in advance of the requirements, because they really don't know, as they say, what is the situation in their supply chain, right the way down that supply chain there. So how do you think that EV can help? Elfie, you're thinking in your book as well. How do you think that EV can help monitor and improve the scope 3 reporting?
Well, one of the ways is, and Tesla has again kind of led the way on this. If you talk to people in the auto industry, one of the things you talk about is that the cars are becoming much more electronic, not electric, but more digital with devices. There's any car today, whether it's a gasoline powered car, electric car, has so much computer power on it that it's just pretty amazing. And they track a lot of things. So finding ways to share, okay, where's that data going? How do we reduce whatever impacts we're concerned about on the planet, on people, has to be a partnership across the supply chain. Okay, so let me give you another example. There's a company, Advanced Drainage Systems, that a lot of people have not heard of. It's actually headquartered within 15 miles of my house. They make piping and systems for managing the rainwater and the flows off of big industrial and store complexes. They are the largest recycler of high-density polyethylene plastic in the world. They did 600 million pounds of the stuff last year, which is 1/3 of the total that gets recycled in the United States. Now, what allowed them to do that? They build a partnership where they work with suppliers, they work with the waste management companies, they can grab the things. They have to extend the partnership. They have to figure out ways to get more of this high-density polyethylene plastic, which, by the way, is like the stuff that your milk jugs come in, your laundry detergent. It's the heavy-duty plastics. Okay, back to carbon black that I mentioned in the other video. Carbon black is what they use to turn the plastic that they're going to put in pipes underground for 100 years, a reliable shade of black. So everything in our world is connected, not necessarily in a circle, but in some sort of supply network that often we don't know everything about unless you go digging a little bit and find out where these things are.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah. Ken, China wants to flood the market with very low cost vehicles, and countries like the UK say they will impose high import tariffs to stop this. Now, what many leaders say to me, is this something that's not right here? Are we being forced to pay too high a price for EV transformation to fuel someone's profits?
That is it's a difficult issue, and one of the so many reasons I'll never run for political office. I don't want to have to split hairs there. I get it. In America, we're worried about Chinese competitors coming in too. We've seen this before in both Great Britain and the United States and Europe. We saw it in the 70s and 80s. One of the companies profiled in my book is Honda, which is labeled as the nervous giant. Why? Well, Honda has 45 miles from my house in Anna, Ohio, the largest manufacturing plant for internal combustion engines. 11 million they produce a year for a variety of cars, motorcycles, power tools, lawnmowers.
Yeah.
Are you nervous if you see an electric vehicle revolution coming at you? Yes, you are. At the same time, Honda's making investments to move towards electric. Okay. Why did I profile Honda? Well, I saw them as a role model for VinFast. You go back to the 70s and 80s in America, Great Britain, and Europe, all the car makers were worried about Toyota and Honda and other Japanese manufacturers coming in and taking their market. What's happened over the last 4 to 5 decades? Largely, those manufacturers have become large employers in the countries where they sell the cars.
Yeah.
Honda produces, I don't know the number off the top of my head, 500,000 or more cars within 40 miles of my house. And they have since they opened up the first motorcycle plant in 1977. So I don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. I understand why tariffs exist. But at the end of the day, human beings are bad at predicting exactly where we're going. And to lay that back into what consumers think about electric cars, generally electric cars drive, they accelerate faster, they do have fewer moving parts, they tend to break down less if we figure them out. But I'll remind anybody watching this, we've had over a century to figure out gasoline engines. We don't have that experience with electric yet. We'll figure a lot of things out.
It's really interesting what you're saying there, and why your book is so important to understand, because only 20 odd miles away from the studio here is Nissan in Sunderland, and the plant obviously manufactures electric Qashqai and so on now, and it's not regarded as Japanese anymore. It's regarded as a local plant, and because it employs so many local people, so therefore it's embedded itself in the community quite well, and whatever it does on innovation is extremely acceptable. So I think that's quite quite an interesting element of within the supply chain thinking, isn't it?
Malcolm, there's a saying, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time.
Yeah.
In my book, in the Honda chapter, one of the things I write about is in the early 1980s, over 40 years ago, there's a store 10 miles from my house. I don't know if it's the same store, where the gent behind the meat counter or the seafood counter recognized that there were more and more people moving in from Japan to work at the Honda plant. And so this gentleman started putting more octopus and other types of seafood out there that at the time, most Midwestern Americans wouldn't even recognize. And the Kroger sales, the store, went up by like a factor of 8. And so the point there is we don't always know where we're going, but as human beings, we can connect with people. So this gentleman, whoever he was, recognized the market opportunity, sold a lot more seafood, made a lot of customers happy. And guess what? 40 years later, Americans eat more seafood, even in the Midwest where I live.
Right. Ken, your book, whilst giving us a superb evaluation of the EV market, focuses on, as you call them, 5 visionaries leading the charge. Now, I just want to dip slightly back into video 1 and do a linkage here. Is this a similar situation to the Henry Ford Model T time, in that it needs a personality to drive the change, or did you find too much ulterior motive and even ego building happening?
That's a tough question. There's always some ego building. You don't become a billionaire without being very confident in what you're doing. You don't become the CEO of a Fortune 500 car maker like Mary Barra of General Motors without being extremely confident. So I think in any leader in the world, whether they're political, business, arts, sports, whatever, there's some healthy ego. Part of what I try to do in my book is separate out ways to say where is it ego and where is it good vision. And that's kind of the large message of the book is we don't always know. Let me tell you another quick story. Have you ever heard, Malcolm, of Marcus Samuel?
No.
Have you heard of John Rockefeller?
Yes.
Of course you've heard of John Rockefeller. Marcus Samuel was a seashell merchant in London and built a trading business his father started. The reason we should care about Marcus Samuel is he went to Azerbaijan in 1888, where there was a huge oil field that we didn't even know how to cap the oil. There was so much oil gushing from this oil field. There was a lake, it put out 20 million, I think, barrels a day. And what Marcus Samuel did is he went there and he looked at it. He goes, we can solve this problem. Now, what was the problem? The Rothschilds controlled the oil field. They could ship oil to Japan and East Asia in tiny little tins, this big, on a wooden ship. By now, you should have a good idea where this is going. Marcus Samuel is the gentleman who came up with the first working oil tanker. He did it by hiring a firm, building in a whole lot of safeguards, and his true genius was the shipyard he hired to make the ship. The president was on the Lloyd's of London board, so that when he took the ship and said, can we go through the Suez Canal? The answer was yes. Took it through the Suez Canal, actually got a night ship because a British Navy ship in 1890 got stuck and got rescued by this oil tanker. Can you imagine?
Right.
So Marcus Samuel founded Shell Oil, hence Shell Merchant, and broke Rockefeller's monopoly.
Fascinating.
And again, my point here is that human beings have great ideas, and visionaries are the men or women who put them into practice and get more right than they get wrong. But even Marcus Samuel got some stuff wrong.
Fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, Ken, my final question, sadly, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but the question is, how far are we away from EVs on balance being better for the environment and being of an acceptable market price? So the balance between the two, for, say, the average company car purchaser.
That's kind of the key question. So better for the environment, hands down, they're better now. Now it depends where your power is coming from. The more your power on the grid is renewable, the better the EV is for the environment. Cost is the factor. In my opinion, all the car makers tried to copy Musk's. What Elon Musk and Tesla did was roll out a very high-priced premium car that was attractive to a certain market segment, what is often called the early adopters. And essentially, the industry fell in line and said, let's do that because it involves minimal sacrifice. But guess what? We're in a reckoning period. And I think all the automotive industry is figuring that out. Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, the heir apparent to the OG Henry Ford, came out 2 or 3 months ago and said, look, we've got to figure out how to make low-cost cars. In fact, he announced he had brought in a team that was a skunk works working on making a low-cost car. So we're back to Henry Ford, making an affordable car that his workers could afford to build. The automakers don't naturally want to run there because it's hard work to make money on low-cost cars. But this is what the Chinese car makers, like BYD, Geely, NIO, they're forcing everybody else to say, hey, make a car for the masses, pure, full stop.
That's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. You know, it's so easy to be very insular, and you think you don't think about the market opportunities in emerging countries like India and so on, and which is fairly carless compared to the US and everything. Ken, let's give our audience details of. Sorry,
real quick, if you can jump in, Malcolm. I had the opportunity to spend a month in Vietnam in writing this book, and that's partly to visit VinFast, and it's fascinating. If you have a chance, go to Vietnam. It's a fascinating country. Still very bicycle and motorcycle based, but many cars. And I think that's important to recognize that the more developing countries want to be where the US, the Great Britain, the Germanys, the Japans have been.
Yeah.
And the market's there.
Just think of in India, all those ambassador cars that need to be replaced that look exactly like the old Morris Oxford from the UK from many years ago. Yeah. Ken, let's give details of your URL, your website address. And obviously, viewers, you can see it on the screen behind me. For listeners, let me spell it out for you. It's all the W's. It's all the W's dot gears, that's the plural, gearschange.com. Ken's book is called The Electric Vehicle Revolution, 5 Visionaries Leading the Change. It's published by Rowman and Littlefield. There are so many options in the business world about the adoption and opinions, shall we say, about the adoption of electric vehicles. And many of those opinions are clouded by people taking their personal opinions. EV investment is not a small change undertaking by any business. Getting your reasoning and motive will be essential. That's where Ken's book will come in to give you that EV evaluation background and thinking that you need so you can reason carefully the way that you're going to go forward with your purchasing.